I'll call our regular board meeting to order. Let's start with the flag salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we have a roll call, please, Laura?
Yes, Director Sisenya,
I'm here.
Director Cross,
Present.
Director Hubbard,
Present.
Vice President Fourcroy,
I'm here.
President Womack.
Present. Okay, so we are announcing closed session, conference with real property negotiation pursuant to government code 54956.8. Shall I open it up for public comment? Yeah, let's see.
There's none online.
Oh, thank you.
Just to let you know, Mr. Armstrong provided us comments.
Thank you. Oh, here it is.
Hi, my name is Aaron Armstrong. I moved here in 1985. My kids went to Sunnyside School, and that's why I'm here. I figured with the crowd that was there a week and a half ago, I would see more people here, but I guess not. So collectively, I've got about 40 years experience working for the government. And so, yeah, I'm not an expert. I don't have any expertise in any field or anything like that. But I strongly support Los Osos retaining the Sunnyside school site. Okay, I just, yeah, you all live in this community. You know what resource that is to us and to our youth sports groups and so on and so forth. I am very strongly opposed to the government, the school district, and as I put in my letter, I consider the school districts as an arm of the government. And we as taxpayers fully fund that, and I have absolutely no problem with that. What I oppose is the fact that a government agency who has had control of the Sunnyside site for decades, and I don't know when it came into be, I don't know how it was acquired, but I know that our taxes have funded the functioning of the school district and the functioning of our schools for decades. And I really oppose the idea that the government is going to sell that resource or would like to sell it to another government agency, because you are part of our local government. You're about as low a representative government as we have here. So my opposition is that a government entity fully funded by our tax dollars, it looks like to me maybe looking to actually profit from the sale of Sunnyside and the Morro Bay School at the detriment of the taxpayers. And I don't believe, and I could be wrong, but I don't believe the Los Osos tax base, 6,092, I believe is what the assessor's office quoted me the other day. And of course that changes, but 6,100 taxpayers, I don't believe can afford to purchase and pay for ongoing maintenance and improvements that the community would like to see over there. So I fully 100% support retaining that as an asset for open space recreational activity, but I strongly oppose the idea that a government body is going to purchase it from another government body, because the taxpayers, in my opinion, already own that site.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll leave and let you guys have your closed session, and thank you.
You can come back later if you like.
Come back at 6 if you like. And what takes place at 6?
That's the open.
Okay, so
If there's anything to report, you'll know it then. This early in the process, that's kind of unlikely.
and I expect yeah, you guys have to put your heads together first, so I don't expect any results yet, but the process has been started.
Yes.
So, thank you.
Thanks.
Have a nice evening.
You too.
Ready. So let's adjourn to closed session. Okay, we'll reconvene to open session. Would you like to announce our reportable action?
Yes, Chair, thank you. The board met in closed session. All members were present regarding the one item on the posted agenda, the real property negotiation item. The board unanimously gave direction to staff to send a response to the school district's notice of availability regarding the Sunnyside Elementary property, to express the district's continuing interest in exploring acquisition of the property.
Did we take public comment on closed session or did we do that before? Okay, all right then. Public safety reports. Do we have fire?
I have both Sheriff Department and CHP online.
Do we have fire in?
John Owens is here, but he's stepped out, but I don't know if he was going to give a report or not. So let's go to the other.
Okay, let's start with sheriff then.
That's fine. That's fine.
Commander Abbas, are you there? I don't know if you want to jump to CHP and then come back to the Sheriff Department report.
Okay, let's start. Let's jump to CHP.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. I apologize for at the last meeting. I was having some technical difficulties and I tried calling in and things didn't work out. And we found a better laptop, I think, that works a lot better than my last one did. So I'm glad everybody can hear me on that. I want to highlight some of the crashes that we ended up having during the month of March and kind of go over some of those issues that we had. We had 2 property damage crashes. And then we had 2 minor injury crashes where people suffered minor injuries that generally doesn't require serious transport. It can, but typically those are like your scrapes, your complainant pains, no large fractures or anything like that. And we had 1 DUI crash. So I'll talk about those 2 right there that we had. The DUI crash was out South Bay and Turry. And ultimately, a vehicle was parked on the right shoulder and tried to make a U-turn and didn't see the other car coming and collided with that other vehicle. The injury was actually to the DUI driver that was minor in nature. The second minor injury crash that we had was at El Moro in South Bay by the Los Osos Middle School. And it was a vehicle versus bike, where a bike was basically paralleling a car, and as the car made a right turn in front of the bicyclist, and the bicyclist struck the side of that vehicle. Nobody was transported on that one. And the second or third injury crash that we had was at South Bay at San Isabel. One of the vehicles just made a right turn against a red, and the other vehicle had the proper right of way, was driving straight, and the vehicle didn't yield to that, and they subsequently collided from there on that. On the last meetings that I attended, there were some questions regarding a follow-up on a hit and run at the Rite Aid. I did some further research on that. There weren't any cameras in the parking lot that captured that, so we were unable to do any further follow-up on that vehicle to see who was involved in that hit and run. That's the information I have from CHP.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? All right, thank you for your report.
Thank you. See you guys next time.
Do we have sheriff?
Commander Abbas, are you available? I have asked him to unmute, but he must have stepped away.
Okay, and then we don't have anyone for fire?
We do not.
Okay, then,
Oh, he just unmuted himself.
oh yay.
Commander Abbas, are you there? . 'Cause- 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 '
Doesn't appear so.
It looks like we're having technical difficulties again.
Okay, we could move to general action item and then loop back.
It is your call.
Okay, let's move along and hopefully we can get that report in a little bit.
Can I take
Uh,
public comment on agenda item 6 real quick?
Okay, let's take public comment on the highway patrol report.
If you're online, please raise your hand and in the boardroom, come to the podium. There is no public comment online.
And none in the boardroom. Okay, general action item, consider an approval of 3-year water plan. General Manager Munns.
Okay, we've been talking water rates for about the last month. I wanted to do a quick recap of the meetings we've been talking to our committees and the board meeting last month. It all started on March 3rd with the Finance Advisory Committee meeting. We looked at the decision points that were needed to kind of move us to the point we're trying to get to tonight. There was some general input given by them, but they needed more information which was provided to them just this last Monday. So I'll have their recommendations as we move forward here. March 6th, the board met and we talked about pretty much the same decision points. There were some tentative decisions made, which I'll show in a table here in a moment. But again, wanted to see some more information, which we'll show you this evening. Let's see. At the March 19th Utility Advisory Committee, I had completed the full water rate analysis, so I provided them the full information. We had a very robust discussion, and then they actually made very firm recommendations based on the information provided. And then again, at March 31st at Finance Advisory Committee, we reviewed the full water rate analysis and they provided their input like I indicated before. So this table summarizes the outcome from the March meetings for net revenue, Zone A property tax contribution to Fund 500 water sales, the inflation rate, which tended to be more of a issue than anything else, and then how we do the base fee. We had talked about having a fixed base fee continue, or the same base fee we have now continue on, or increasing it over time. So we'll talk about each one of these, but I was going to show this summary slide up front because it appears we have agreement or somewhat agreement on net revenue at $750,000. For people that don't know what this net revenue is, it is an amount of money that we're trying to raise above and beyond our operational costs for capital projects. Zone A is a general property tax provided that is assessed to all properties in the district. And the committees and the board indicated they had a desire to continue a contribution because of our leadership role on basin management issues and other water supply projects, so it benefit the entire community. Inflation was the key one we had debate on. We'll get back to that one, but there was indication that increasing the base fee over time was desirable, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So I just gave a general definition for what net revenue is, and it's really that you create additional revenue above your the expenses that you have, like debt service, or administrative cost, and non-capital budgetary items. And it can be used for a general, most anything that the board desires, but typically we push that towards our capital outlay reserve, and that the outcome was, and I just reviewed this in the table, the board tentatively agreed back in March on the $750,000, but UAC and FAC both recommended that as the goal as well. Because if you recall, we looked at somewhere between $700,000 and $800,000. 700 seemed to be a little bit too low after going through the analysis, and 800,000 based on our capital needs seemed like that might be over collecting. So we wanted to hit a midpoint at the $750,000 level. We can discuss these for the board at each. There's 5 of these points that we'll talk about. So why don't we stop here and see what the board's desires on net revenue.
All right. Would the board like to chime in?
It seems like all of the committees were in agreement with that level. So I don't know how much more we need, it meets our goals in terms of keeping our capital projects going, but it doesn't over collect. There's only so many projects we can deliver in a year. It's kind of the way utilities looked at it. And this was an amount that seemed to match what was possible for us to deliver.
That is correct. We've looked at when we've had an aggressive capital project program for a year, it's hard for us to push out the projects that we've got budget for.
Well, it looks good to me. I'm kind of guessing.
Yeah, I think that it's a good balance between ensuring that we have enough capital to make the necessary improvements and repairs in the system that need to be made, while not over collecting and ending up with a lot of money in reserves. So I think that that's a good balance.
Yeah, I say you got three different entities there that are agreeing on the 750, and that's, three different groups of three different sets of people. And so that's I think a good example of enough people getting on board to say the 750 is good.
Ron, what are some of the capital improvement projects that we have coming up?
Well, we need to finish our program Seawell. We're hoping that's going to be this year, but it could spill over. We're not sure about that one. The big ticket item right now is SCADA, our communication software platform for our wells and tanks to communicate with each other. That's what SCADA is. We have a valve replacement program, about $640,000. We have the 10th Street Tank Rehabilitation Project. That's both exterior and interior. We have the heavy equipment storage building and the office remodel, water yard office remodel.
That we've put off for years and years.
Right.
I remember that one. Okay, yeah, I just wanted to kind of go through those a little bit because
And there's
when we-
more on our list, but those are the ones that
when we
we're
say
working on
net
right now.
revenue and capital reserve accounts, I mean, it means that we have a system that was designed and built many years ago, and it takes ongoing maintenance, repairs and upgrades to keep it going.
Good
So-
to point that out. So I think we're in agreement. Let's move along.
Move on? Okay. Zone A property tax. I explained this a little bit. The board has decided to use a small amount. We get a little over, it's about, I think, coming up maybe $330,000 a year from Zone A. We usually distribute it through fire, water has been on that list, drainage, especially after our drainage disaster in 2023, and Parks and Rec. So because of our leadership role in the basin and on the Basin Management Committee and the other projects we're pursuing for water supply for the community, both finance and utilities recommended the 50,000, and the board had indicated they were willing to contribute something in our March 6th meeting.
Yeah, I agree that you do things that benefit the whole community. So I'm fine with.
Even the
Still making
chair of
fun.
UAC was on board with this one.
Okay, good. Any other comments from the board?
No, I think this probably be our only Zone A contribution other than to Parks and Rec and trying to make Sunnyside happen for a bit, but that's my own personal feeling.
Okay, we'll move on. This one's always been an interesting one. I think I explained this fairly well at our last meeting because I did have information that we have to predict our water sales, which is key. And to do that, you can see from this, it's kind of been a little all over the place for the last 4 years. When we looked at this, and before I forget, I want to thank Richard Margetson. He's in the back there, and he's been my sounding board and reviewed all these numbers to make sure I was on track. And so I want to thank him. So when we were talking, our last rate analysis that we're just wrapping up this year, we used 210,000 billing units. Billing units, these are the units that are a measurement of water. One billing unit is 748 gallons. So as you can see, 2021 was COVID. A lot of people home, kids at home. Water use was up. So when we went in the last, from 21, 22 to 23, 2023, 24, this is the rate plan we've been working under. We were at about the 210, at that 209,000. But then we saw a big dip. But of course, that corresponded with almost record-breaking rain during that winter, when it appears people just shut off water for a long period of time because it started raining in December and went through April. We're on track this year, or from the 2023 year. I mean, we had the 211,000, but I indicated that the middle school used an extraordinary amount of water during this year, and that we didn't want to overestimate. And that was almost 12,000 units of water, that was more than their average. And it appears they are on target to use about their average this year. So to try to hit the magic number, we're recommending the 200,000 units, and FAC and UAC both agreed with that recommendation.
All right, is board on board with 200,000 units?
Yes.
This is one of those crystal ball things,
Yep.
The chair was a little nervous, but the committee said 200,000. So
What did you?
I'm just looking at all the numbers. But I don't want to overestimate that. I have confidence in our estimators.
We've got good
We do.
conservation.
Yeah. Yeah.
People in our community, so.
yes.
I think given how well the discrepancies of the water usage has been explained by Ron, I think I'm pretty comfortable with 200,000.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
let's move on.
Okay, here was the one where we couldn't get consensus across the board. I want to, the inflation rate, how this is used in our rate model is it's applied to our operation and maintenance budget only. This is, our O&M, so this would include our salaries for our water workers, chemicals, other, materials. And the current rate analysis, or the one we use 4%. When I went, there is actually a CPI index for water, sewer, and trash, and it has been tracking for the last year at about 3%. The board tentatively agreed with the 3%. UAC was very strongly recommending 4%, and then Monday night, it went back and forth, and we actually ended up with a 2-2 split between the 3% and 4%. So what I wanted to do is show you a few numbers here. I went back and I did a comparison. So the scenario 2 is the 3% inflation, and scenario 8, and there is that in our board packet. You could see all the analysis that I went through in terms of trying to figure out what the differences were between these scenarios. So you can see the rate structure. Obviously, with the 3%, you're going to have to we're trying to reach the same revenue requirement. So it just how we spread it out, and that 1% can make that difference in the you can see just like year one, tier one, $7.21 versus $7.28. Not a huge difference, but as you can see going down through the years and the tiers, the difference. Now, what does that mean to the customer? This compares a customer using 11 billing units in a bi-monthly billing cycle, what the difference in percent and what it means, bi-monthly and then monthly. We try to just pick, because we bill bi-monthly, we wanted to show both the impact to the customer. So, the overall, when you get to cumulative total down at the bottom there, it's, $23.27 versus $25.04. And the rates, percentage rates are fairly close at 4.58 and 4.92% for the 3-year average. So you can see it's not tremendously different, but what does it mean in terms of revenue? Over the course of hitting those revenue requirements, you would collect about $95,000, $96,000 more with a percent difference. Any comments on that?
I think that, I think that the 3% is probably a fine number for us to go with. Those differences are small, on the per user number. And the difference overall per year between those is something that if we did have an issue that we could catch up with other means.
Mhm.
And I think that if we can, try to be as conservative as we can while we're covering the cost to purvey water, I think that we should take that route.
I would like to know, I agree with what he said. I want to like to know what UAC, why they were so adamant about 4%, and what information occurred to cause FAC to suddenly split.
And they are, that committee's been together, that group of people, and they've really want to make sure we have things covered, I guess. And so they thought error, if we're going to have an error, it should be on the high side. More than anything, just to ensure that we're covering our expenses and collecting the revenue we need to operate the system. I think at FAC, we started out at 4%, but then when people started thinking about, the impact, looking at the numbers, we got to a 2.2.
I think Catherine Corson really felt that she's not seeing 4% inflation.
Right. And, there is that data. That's our only data point is that CPI for water, trash and sewer.
But I think like Lisa was more in favor of 4, felt that if we didn't need the 4, we don't have to take the 4. So I think she was erring on the side of
Well, that
not
was,
having to come back and ask for more money.
that's a really interesting piece, right? That didn't get portrayed very accurately, I don't think, in the news. But I mean, we vote every year about the rate increase, right?
No, we'll do a 218, but what we have is the opportunity every year to decide not to take, let's say.
Right, and we've done that.
Right.
We've made that
one year,
decision.
in the last rate plan, the third year, we didn't even take any rate increase.
Right, we saw that even though that the community had voted for it and that we could have easily taken it, that we decided we didn't need to, and
Correct.
and we didn't
Right.
take it.
If
So
we
that's
hit
a
our,
good-
if we
good
hit our
point.
revenue goal, then we tend to not raise the rates.
So the 4% gives us that leniency to make a decision as the future unfolds.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I think there was some concern from the committee too about actual parts and cost of construction inflation, particularly as we go into the future. And that is something that certainly changes day by day anymore, it seems like. But it weighed heavily on their decision too. It wasn't just a matter of let's make sure we have enough money. There were legitimate reasons for them to think that 4% might be more necessary.
That the utility inflation has been higher than the average inflation for the,
Well, not according to the number you gave. That
I didn't look at what regular CPI was. I just looked at that specific index to compare.
Yeah.
But typically utility type things do run higher.
all right, so have we split the board now?
No, I maybe am changing my position. We have that decision making, and we go through that yearly. So I'm fine with the 4%, and we're going to review it. And if we don't need it, we don't need to
we
take
don't
it.
take it. We've done that before, and I can remember that conversation. And the specific comment that really struck me was, well, let's just take it. It's been approved. Don't rock the boat. And I just thought, wow, that's not the way you think about that.
No.
Rocking the boat is taking more than you need. So that's always on our mind.
Now, could the opposite also be true if we realize in a year that 3% is enough? Shaking your head, so no.
You can't go back and increase.
Well, you'd have to go
Right.
through another Prop
Another
218.
vote, yeah.
Right.
I do worry that since it's such a kind of arguably small amount, that it's not really that necessary. I don't know. I'm not quite as comfortable raising it any more than we should, even if we have the option to lower it in the future. Or not raise it in the future.
Ron, I'm looking at the two scenarios here in the book here, and I'm looking at the revenue versus expenses
Mhm.
bottom line there.
Mhm.
And I'm seeing that the 3% with the revenue versus expenses is $769. And the revenue versus expenses with the 4% is 718. So I'm just wondering what benefit the 4% is if it's giving you less on the bottom line than the 3% is. How does that work out?
I'm not quite sure, Rich, I'm sorry, which number you're looking at on the page.
Right toward the end of this, it says for consideration, scenario 2,
Uh-huh.
and then it says for consideration, scenario 8.
Correct.
And at the very bottom of, right before you hit the blue page there, I guess, it says revenue versus expenses.
Oh, let me explain that number.
Okay.
In trying to balance to the revenue requirement, at least in my skills in Excel, I have to get it as close as I can. That just means we would be over collecting in that one instance, let's say for the year one, 4%, $718. So that all that number is telling me that I've gotten close to zero. You want that to be as close to zero as possible.
Okay, so the lower number is better.
The closest you can get to zero is the best.
Okay.
And so in terms of adjusting the rates, I could spend a lot more time to get to zero, but
Okay, so the 4% gets you closer to zero than the 3%.
well, no, I think what I would say is discount that number. It really doesn't mean
Oh.
anything other than it was a way for me to gauge how close I was to getting it exactly right.
Oh,
He's trying to balance the revenue with the expenses, which are
Right.
separate things.
Right.
And so these are really big numbers. And so $700 is basically saying they're in balance.
Right.
okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. All right.
So it sounds like they're mostly in balance either way.
Yeah, they're
And the other
close.
thing
They
is
both
that
are
you look at
close.
those pages, the other thing is part of the art is balancing the increase between tiers. So you got a few things going on here.
All right, are people leaning? Should we take a little straw poll
let's
and
do a
say
straw
who
poll.
thinks 3 and who thinks 4?
Do we need public comment?
Well, no, we'll get public comment
At
at the
the
very
end.
end.
Okay.
When we take a proper vote.
Okay.
At the moment, I'm leaning towards 3. But I'm very curious what public comment would say. They're the ones who would change my opinion, I think, the most.
Okay, how many people are leaning towards 3? And who's leaning towards 4?
I do understand 4. It's just not my preference.
Yeah, with everything going on right now, I think, just, raising it as little as possible is probably the way to go.
All right,
Okay,
so
so we'll continue on then.
sounds good.
I think we got one more thing here. Base fee. For people to understand what the base fee does, it's a fixed cost. And but over 80% of our operating costs are fixed, meaning that very little of it's variable. And so when you have a multi-tiered rate like we do, and 4 tiers are actually quite a few tiers, you usually see 2 or 3, it becomes more unstable in terms of what your prediction is for revenue. For instance, if you're in a higher tier and you decide, well, I want to lower my bill, you use less water, and so you drop a tier. And then if we haven't predicted correctly the sales of water within each tier, it can create, revenue income issues. So the base fee, what that does is provide that revenue stability. And if at the level we're trying to stay at is about 40% of our revenues are in our base fee. And what keeping the base fee going up with our cost provides that stability. And this is the part where you need to understand, even if you stay at a fixed base fee, that means your per unit charge has to change because you still have to make the same amount of revenue. So, you know, even if you're a low water user, our lower tiers would have to be higher to get again to that magic number that we're trying to get to of our revenue requirement. So with that, this is what we had recommended, and that FAC and both UAC recommended increasing the base fee over the 3-year period.
All right, what does the board think? Yeah. I
I'm really
like it.
comfortable with that series of numbers.
Okay.
Okay, moving on then.
So, what we'll need to decide, maybe, you know, after public comment, we can hone in based on the input that we received. It would either be that scenario 2 or scenario 8 that I just presented. The difference is the 3% and 4%. So with that, we can move to public comment.
All right, let's open public comment on this item.
If you are online, please raise your hand, and in the boardroom, please come to the podium. There is no public comment online.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jeff Simons, 20-year resident, Los Osos. A couple of items, I heard you discussing the rate increases. I believe I heard in the last meeting that there was a rate stabilization fund of approximately $137,000 that had never been touched, if I'm remembering correctly. So that might help in mitigating the worry about the 3% versus the 4%. If we've never touched it, what's it there for? So consider that in your decision to go between 3 and 4. For us, the public, you know, the difference is important. And as you said, we'd like to save as much as we can along the way. The other item was in terms of the base fee. I'm unclear why a large agricultural user would have the same base fee as a single family resident. It seems to me to make more sense to have, since the single family residents are using so much less in volume than the large agricultural users, I feel that there should be a separate based fee for the single family homes versus the large farmers and people using hundreds of cubic feet of water each month, and the single family home is using so much less. I think it'll be more fair for the agricultural users that are drawing much more water out of the ground and using the water to pay more of a percentage of the base fee than a single family residence. So I know it wasn't in your discussion tonight, but maybe for future consideration. So, but I urge you to go on terms of the percentages, err on the side of being lighter. And I think you've got that reserve there to help you later if you did run into it that you needed to draw from. That's what it's there for. So let's use that. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Did you want to read it and then we would all hear it at once?
It's not mine.
Oh,
Someone
okay.
left it there.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lucia Stone, and my family and I have been residents here since November 2022, but I grew up in San Luis Obispo Elementary through Cal Poly. I just, I want to remind you all that you are a public agency and you do represent us, the people. And as a public utility, your obligation is to keep people informed. And in everything that we've seen tonight, no one knows about this. I've asked my friends, I've asked my neighbors, I got pulled into the KSBY story where the sound bites weren't even they were cut short. But anyways, I really feel like to make a decision like this, as officially we start a economic world war today, that's what it's being called. You're doing this on the backs of Lososians. While I do have the floor, I do want to say I want to join your advisory committee. I have a utility background. I've done the Water Academy statewide program through Metropolitan. And I was just in Sacramento last Monday with the Department of Water Resources talking about their issues. And there's a lot the state is facing in the world of water. And we as a community need to have that represented here on a local level. But when it comes to the 3% versus 4%, I think you need to err on the side of 3% for all the reasons that I want to go through. And I wasn't there for the advisory committee meetings, so excuse me for not sitting in on those meetings. But like I said, the public outreach hasn't been in existence. I want to know why the revenue requirement isn't being analyzed more. I want to know what's the cost of O&M versus capital projects that are listed for this. I want to know where's the water savings campaign if your largest user is the middle school. I want to know how these capital projects are being analyzed with the tariffs that were put out today. So not what your committee voted on 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, today. You know, an office, you know, and then what's the scoring system you guys are using for these capital projects? You know, SCADA, sure. Seawall, yeah. Office remodel, that may have to hold for another few years. I mean, with the cost of construction, you know, or large equipment storage, I don't know enough about these projects, but I think you guys need to look at it with another lens because what was true 3 weeks ago isn't true now. And to make this decision, you're doing it on the backs of your neighbors. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Josh Warren. I moved to Los Osos a few years ago. I want to thank Mr. Munns for explaining everything. That makes a lot more sense than when I was trying to read it in my own living room without you there to tell me what everything meant. So I appreciate you. I wish I could have known that before I was up here to explain my route. I really appreciate you telling me what those projects were because that wasn't in the report that I got. So the only reason I got in the mail was inflation. So for me and my family and a lot of us residents, we hear inflation as an excuse for raising prices on us repeatedly in the grocery store, in everything you can think of, and it's happening a lot. So while you're talking about 3% to 4% to making sure you cover the things that I legitimately I think they're important. I think they matter. I don't want to say that they don't, but when it comes to us, we're deciding what food we buy. We're deciding if we replace our tires or we try to go on them a little bit farther. Inflation has crushed us. Most of my income goes to my mortgage. And then for the rest of it, we're putting it on credit cards. So I want you to think of that. And that's happening to a lot of our family friends, everyone in the community, because we're trying to get through this mess. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. So please consider that as you quibble between 3% or 4% and covering your own basis. Thank you very much.
Richard Margetson. That's what it's like out there, folks. As you know, I was for the 4%. That was because that's what I think the prediction's going to be. But I brought up and it's fully funded now. We do have the rate stabilization reserve, and it's time to consider that in the future if revenue doesn't hit where it's supposed to hit. It would be nice if, well, I don't know if it'd be nice, but depending on what happens with tariffs and stuff, some of these projects, they may have to be put off. We may have to prioritize the absolute necessities in the future, which means we might not need that full 750 each year. And maybe a scenario arises in the next 3 years or at the next rate study that maybe we don't take the increase. I mean, we made the argument 4 years ago, was it, Ron? 4 years ago, not to take, 4 years ago, not to take the increase. You've heard all my other comments. I've been at all these meetings. The kind of following up on what they were talking about, the community. I'm president of People Helping People in our food giveaway on Wednesday at the community center. When I started 20 years ago, we averaged 35 to 40 people coming through the line. last week, the line from the partition at the center to the windows of the people helping people was nonstop from 9:30 to 10:15. We did over 110 people coming through line, representing probably about 350 in household population. So for a lot of people out there in this community on fixed incomes, times are tough, and the grocery stores are killing us.
And I have the one message
will
right
you
here.
read it for us?
Real quick. It's from Corrine Colon. I oppose the 4% water cost increase. This will put a significant financial burden on my family and livelihood. Please don't allow it to happen.
Thank you. Thanks for all the public comment. Do you want to address any?
Yes, really good comments, and I appreciate those. And, welcome to the community. It's a wonderful spot. As far as the base fee, we don't have ag users in our service area. We do, and most of it's small commercial. The middle school, of course, is a big customer because it's the main park we have, basically.
It is
So-
our sports fields.
Yeah, it's our
Yeah.
sports field,
Of
especially
our entire
soccer.
town.
Grass watering.
Right. So, with the small commercial that we have, they typically, most of them don't even use as much as a single family household, but there's a few exceptions in there. As far as outreach, you're absolutely right, because our next step with this, we're not making a decision tonight. That'll be in June. So we'll do the Proposition 218 notice. I do like your questions about what our capital program is. We basically have a 10-year list. We break it into 5 years increments, and we try to go through. We've prioritized the programs. We're getting an updated water master plan any day now, any week now. I think the projects aren't going to change that much, but that's what we work off and prioritize. We've been checking off for the last 6 years, quite a few of the big ones. So we're very fortunate that way, because we had a lot of deferred maintenance for many, many years. But that said, I can provide all that information, and we have our budget discussions coming up. Our May meeting, we look at the preliminary budgets, and that's not just for water, but we do the fire station, our drainage, and a few of the other smaller funds that we have. So there'll be a lot of information in those coming up, and that'll be during the Prop 218 period. Again, if you want to leave your information, or you can call or come by anytime. They probably call better to make sure I'm here, but I'm willing to sit down and show you our plans and how those work, because that is important information. And totally understand the inflation issues, the inflation that we experience, not only as residents in the community, but in our operations during COVID were just incredible. Things went up hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now they seem to be coming down and stabilizing, but it was a really, really rough period. And as we know, going to the grocery store, it really hasn't gone back. So those are the few comments I have, I hope. But I want to make sure, open door. You guys want to come by and talk. I'll talk water all day.
But also, there's a few things I wanted to add is that, we're making a prediction out into the future about a bunch of unknowns. And unfortunately, the cost to run this system is the cost to run the system. And either the district is financially healthy or it becomes unhealthy. And we've all worked really hard over a lot of years to make it a healthy district. Which kind of brings me to my second point, is that it's great that we're able to have this discussion. We're purveying water, our district is purveying water to the town at a better rate than parts of the other parts of town. And that process is not transparent like this. It's not, you can come stop by, walk in and talk to people in your own town. So, yeah, we take this really seriously. It comes up. It comes in 3-year chunks, and this is the year that it's hitting. And I am all for saving as much as we possibly can, while maintaining a solvent, healthy organization.
And I thought I forgot, it was a really good point about the rate stabilization fund. Both people brought up on that as a little bit of a backstop for us.
the tricky part about inflation, like, we're trying to keep our system up to date. If we postpone it, is it gonna be more expensive later? Like if inflation's going up, we're better off. That's kind of why we have such an aggressive capital plan, like do it it's more expensive.
And we do put out monthly financial statements on all our funds, but water. And so that's why we hope that we're transparent enough so people can actually see the dollars, what's going in, what's budgeted, down to paper towels, basically.
Well, and to your point, Chris, and to some things that were said earlier, we have been postponing the equipment storage yard and the water building remodel for 4 or 5 years now, every year. In fact, that was the last question to Ron from Utilities. How do you face the crew every year after budget? And tell them, well, not again this year.
It's really bad,
It's-
really bad.
But the other point is that we will not accomplish the things that keep the infrastructure operating. We're not going to put off the 10th Street tank remodel, or the painting. We will not, the SCADA, we've been waiting and waiting. We're in the middle of that. We're not going to put that off. Equipment yard, we've already decided that that'll have to wait again. The one thing about the rate stabilization reserve, I think is kind of making the difference to me. I'd forgotten all about that. And I was totally prepared to support UAC's 4% recommendation, but given everything going on, Sunnyside being such a hot issue right now, and that's why I almost suggested you flip the order of the meeting. I figured people were here to talk about Sunnyside. Yeah, that was all wrong. Thank you for showing up and showing the interest. We appreciate it.
And I don't know that I don't think we have openings on committees, at least not that I'm aware of, but you're welcome to come to them.
We'd
and
appreciate
get
that
all
input.
Yeah, come and participate
Yeah.
as the
You
public.
can participate like you are
You
participating
have
now.
knowledge.
And they're all hybrid, so you can zoom in as well. Right.
Yeah, and then when we do have openings, they're advertised on our website, and we need those spots filled, so.
But don't wait for that opening to participate.
Yeah,
Please, no. Good.
One thing I want to emphasize is that whatever decision we come to today, it isn't an official decision until June 5th, until we hold the public hearing. So if we do decide, for instance, to do the 3% increase, and UAC and FAC still adamantly recommend 4%, I want a really good reason why they still recommend that.
No,
But can't we-
it's the board decision that you're
Right.
making tonight.
Right. And actually, if this starts the 218 process, what we decide tonight is the final 3
Is
or
that
4.
right?
Yeah.
This is.
Yeah, we can't change.
So-
Yeah, it's going to go on the ballot. And we can't put that out as a 3 or 4% based on how we feel. Not if you're
Yes,
asking for a
we'll-
vote.
We'll have the Prop 218 notice out
Yeah.
next week.
So we need to make a
We need to
decision.
make a decision on
tonight.
what would pass that.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
all right.
So a reminder, scenario 2 is the 3% and scenario 8 is the 4%.
Nice and confusing. All right, do I hear a motion?
I'll move that the board tentatively approve the water rates in scenario 2, the one that increases it by 3%. The water rate analysis and direct staff to issue an appropriate public notice in accordance with Proposition 218, and to set the date of the public hearing to consider about adopting the water rate increase on June 5th, 2025.
I'll second that.
Tie.
Richard, I think got it.
Hey,
Do we need a voice? Is it voice or roll call?
Just do a roll call. Just,
Okay, let's do a roll
this
call
is
vote.
good.
Director Cross,
Yes.
Director Hubbard,
Yes.
Director Sesenia,
yes.
Vice President Forkroy,
Yes.
President Womack.
Yes. All right,
Thank you.
yeah, thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Do we still have a sheriff?
He had to leave at 6:30. He wanted to apologize for his technical difficulties.
Okay, All right, well, we tried.
Well, we have the written report.
Yes, we do. Now it's time for public comments for items not on the agenda.
If you're online, please raise your hand. And if you're in the boardroom, please come to the podium. There is no public comment on.
And then in the boardroom. All right, we need to pull from the consent agenda, item.
We can wait until we go
Oh,
to
okay.
administrative reports and. we
I'm
put-
jumping the gun.
Yeah. that's
Okay, let's start administrative and committee reports. Utilities, or is that written only? General manager
Typically,
report?
if there is anything of major interest, I put it in my GM report, so I didn't forget. I did want to mention the program Seawell has been delayed again. Haven't been able to get PG and out to actually plug it all in. Basically, everything's there, connections ready to go, but they can schedule us till June. So that's kind of off the utilities, but I had it in my GM report. Do you want me to move on to the general, if there's any questions about utilities?
Nope.
Okay. The only thing I had was just a quick recognition of the Sunnyside School property acquisition effort, and that we had our town hall meeting on March 22nd. I put in here over 150 people. I've been told it's more closer to 200 people showed up. It was kind of facilitated by Deborah Howe from LOCAC. Then I did a presentation from CSD perspective on what we've done to date and what we've been trying to do. Supervisor Gibson provided an update from the county and the news about their not being the lead agency, and not sure what kind of contribution they can have to the project, but wanted to stay involved. Then we had a presentation by Wallace Group, which I think went really well, given the amount of time we had to pull something together. They presented a couple of conceptual plans on things that might be able to fit at the 12-acre parcel. We tried to keep those at a high level and check as many boxes as we could from what we knew the community's desires were based on surveys and conversations that we'd had. And then we touched on a high level on cost, is basically saying there's a spectrum. They actually had a graphic of an arrow pointing both ways, this being lower cost, this being higher cost. At the end of the presentation and at the very end, people were given dots that they could put where they would, how much they would contribute just on the spectrum. And it was amazing how many were in the middle towards the high. There's definitely.
Were there dollar amounts?
No, it was just.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but we had about 45 minutes of question and answer, which I thought went really well. We used cards, which I think helped a lot in going through. So Supervisor Gibson and myself traded off on answering questions. But all in all, it was very successful. We are trying to work on next steps. The closed session tonight, as we reported out, was to send a second letter of interest to the school district. And we will be keeping the community informed. Another town hall meeting will be organized once we have enough information, mainly on cost, to keep everyone in the loop. With that, I can answer any questions.
I had a question about fire, actually.
Okay.
Where are we at this year on our fire contract, and has that progressed since
It's been
this year? The
very
beginning of the
difficult
year?
and slow. I have a meeting next Tuesday, I believe, in the morning, or next Thursday in the morning, with the county CAO, our unit chief, John Owens, and I suppose it'll be others from county admin. Chief Owens has been working. I've got staffing numbers, but we don't know where we're going to land on some of the some services we haven't been paying for, like dispatch. Those are the things we still have to work through.
So in general, our contracts being like the contract that's been in place, we're redoing it.
Yeah, it's been difficult because CAL FIRE and the county, since we're a subcontract to the county, not CAL FIRE and the county just signed this fiscal year's 1-year contract. So they're behind and they're working towards a 3-year contract. And that's what they want to do with us. I have a feeling what's going to happen is we'll see what comes out of this meeting on Thursday, but we know staffing costs are what they are. You know, we're not changing the level. The increases are going to be significant more because of the change in schedules and the negotiated salaries for the fire union. There's just some unknowns on mechanics. They want us to share a mechanic, the cost of a mechanic, dispatch fees, and that since we don't pay for a battalion chief, there's talk about us sharing a battalion chief between the airport, Pismo, and us. But that's not going to happen this next fiscal year. That one for sure. But there's a couple of still unknowns we have to work through for this upcoming fiscal year. So there really hasn't been any conversation except what I've had with John Owens, who has relayed that over to Matt Pontus, the county CAO. So I'll be talking next week about that.
Okay. Thanks for the update.
Ron, I have a question on the Sunnyside
Mhm.
deal there. Are there any outside private, either groups or people that are also working, to your knowledge, that are working on this whole project that we may or may not know about, or?
Well, there's a group, Jerry J. Freiberg is wanting to support us, and he is trying to get on a parallel path. It's been a hard one to figure out exactly how he's wanting to fit into this, but his feeling is if we get to a point and we want to move forward, he wants to have a group of people. They could maybe be the people that circulate a petition, make it a citizens initiative. But he wants to have a meeting on April 19th to bring in some outside people, like the person that was spearheaded the Cayucas Vets Hall renovation. A lot of that was private money. Some of it was grant and some of it was county, but a big portion of it was private money. So I forget the gentleman's name, but he's going to come speak at that. So I think Gary's intent is to help organize some sort of framework where we could get private money, mixed in with whatever community money we need.
So he's working in conjunction with us, and he's being transparent, obviously, in what he's doing, and
Yeah,
there won't be any
it's not
surprises.
it's not like the CSD has said, yes, we approve of what you're doing, but it's still kind of morphing. I'm not sure how that part of the effort's going to turn out.
Okay.
All right. Who did LoCAC?
I did.
All right.
So I got a report written up. It's hard to summarize an entire month general meeting in just a couple sentences. But the main things I want to point out is Bruce Gibson talked about the county's upcoming budget, and it seems like they're going to have $35 million more in expenses than they are in revenue. And I hate to be the messenger on that, but I felt like that was important to bring up. And the big thing I want to focus on is LoCAC was in charge of, I believe they were in charge of the survey distributed during the town hall regarding Sunnyside. And I just wanted to share the results of that. There are 873 responses to that survey. 820 of them supported the acquisition, while 53 did not. Of all of those responses, only 152 said that they were not willing to contribute any finances to that in any way. That equates to about, what was the math that I put on here? About 17.5% who were absolutely uninterested in any financial contribution to that project. And those are the big updates I have. You can read the full report if you want any more, or if any questions arise, I'll do my best to answer them.
Thank you.
I have a question about the committee reports. Land use, review 2 projects. We'll have a training scheduled.
Chuck, can you please turn on your microphone?
Pardon me.
Thank you.
I have a question about the land use committee reports. The training schedule, is that to familiarize LoCaC members with the county permitting process?
Correct.
I believe that is
That is-
specifically for land use members. I
Right,
think
right.
any member of LoCaC is also welcome to join that, but I'm not
Okay.
certain.
Because there were, a month ago, they expressed a lot of concern about time, their time commitments and that kind of thing. So this might be the first step in assuring them of just what's going to be asked of them.
Mhm.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
All right. Thank you for your report.
My pleasure.
All right, Parks and Rec, we have a report.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to add. Essentially, we discussed Sunnyside, we discussed the upcoming town hall, which we've
Yeah,
gone
what's
over
happened?
all of those pieces here. But we're going to have another Parks and Rec meeting this month. I believe it's the 15th.
Correct.
And we're gonna, Sunnyside and that whole project that we're working on is very fluid. So I'm sure that we'll have new things to talk about in a couple of weeks. So that'll be a good spot to have more discussion.
Any questions? All right, thank you. Utilities advisory?
Well, our bulk of our time was spent on the 3 versus 4%.
Yes, and we know the results of
We
that
know
now.
the results of that, yeah.
Okay. And finance, they, we know the results of the split results of the inflation recommendation, but they recommended approval of the warrant register and receiving and filing the financials. Let's see, BSAC, no basin management. Any community interest in reports or attendance of public meetings, training programs?
Yeah, I went to a training program this morning and yesterday morning for the CSDA.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
How was it?
it was great. There was talking a lot about engaging the public for big projects, and a lot of what I learned there, I plan on applying to the Sunnyside potential.
All right, that's a
Hard to
relevant,
summarize an entire, like, sorry to cut you off. This 6-hour training, but yeah, there you go.
sounds like a relevant topic, so that's good. Any response to previous asked questions?
Nothing to report.
Okay, so now we need to pull from the consent, the item G, the introduction of the first reading entitled only of an ordinance. Does anyone want to pull anything else from the consent agenda? Okay, then let's take public comment for items on the administrative and committee reports, except item G.
If you're online, please raise your hand and in the boardroom, come to the podium. I have one online.
Okay, let's start with that one.
All right, Julie or Jeff, you just have to mute yourself.
Yes, good evening. This is Jeff Edwards. There appears, and I'm speaking to the reports B and E on your agenda, there appears to be an absence of good information regarding this Sunnyside consideration. For example, the property tax that would be established is over the approximately 6,400 dwelling units in Los Osos, not the 10,000 lots. And at a minimum, this project is in the tens of millions. I estimate it to be at least $20 million. And including O&M, the monthly cost is likely to be around $40 or $480 per year as a tax. The next election is June of 2026. And so it's going to be needed a special election to meet the school board timeline, which would place that in 2025. The threshold to pass such a measure is a minimum of 50% plus one. That's with the voter initiative. If the district puts it on the ballot, it requires a super majority or 66%. Virtually impossible. Any ballot measure is going to require a significant campaign budget in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. A special election, just the county cost, is $350,000. Preparation for such an election, for legal, admin, engineering, the whole thing's going to cost over $500,000. More importantly, this district's priorities include a fire tax increase, both for the fire station and staffing considerations. We have the state water project, intertie, that's going to cost up to $10 million, and then we need to acquire the water entitlement to put in the pipe. There's been comparisons to Cayucas or Cambria. I believe these are misplaced. It's almost laughable. The demographics are entirely different in those communities. And I will tell you the fundraising will likely be as well. You're not a city. Even Morro Bay is going to be highly challenged to deal with Morro Elementary School. You have no tax base. This district can ill afford an election budget, let alone any kind of purchase. You're simply not in the real estate business. I am available for any questions if you have them. Thank you.
There is no further public comment online.
Okay, thank you. I think we have one in the boardroom.
Just real quick, Richard Margetson. The meeting Gary Freiberg's talking about, when is that and where is it? And is it open to the public? And I'm just gonna throw this out here. And I know it's not gonna go anywhere, but the taxpayers paid for the school. Why are we having to buy it? Seriously, there should be legislation at some point. Somebody should bring legislation to Sacramento that there's either serious discount or for certain purposes, it's turned over to the community. I don't know if there's anything in the current codes or anything about that, but pay for it. They don't use it, and now we got to buy it back. Wow.
I don't know much about the meeting. I know it's April 19th. I believe it's at Sea Pines. I think it's invitation only. But that's about all I know. And there's been a lot of comments about why do we have to buy Sunnyside, but that's.
Could I offer a thought on that? And this is the only thing that I can come up with, because that was my first question too. And it's been one I hear a lot. And that is that San Luis Coastal is bigger than Los Osos. So taxpayers outside of Los Osos contributed to the purchase of that school for the district.
Correct.
Now, to tease that all out and which part, at that point, it becomes pretty difficult. And that's the only thing I can think of.
I don't know.
It belongs to the
I
district.
have
You know,
a train of thought on that there is a lot of focus on that piece of it, and I understand why. And I also have asked that question, and I also understand that it's a great sentiment, but it's not going to help us at all. What if instead of looking at it on the front end, we looked at that as an additional benefit potential on the back? Whereas if this were to happen and the school district suddenly has $5 or $6 million of facility money, I'm wondering if we as Los Osos could petition that a portion of that money stay in Los Osos and go for upgrades of perhaps our sports fields at Loams or other facilities in town. So I kind of am hoping that we can get more energy behind looking at what is possible with it, because I don't see a path forward trying to make an argument that we don't need to pay for it.
You know, this is all embedded in government and education code.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
right.
But I'm trying to wrap my head around something that most people can live with and accept and see as, okay, it was bigger than Los Osos that contributed to the purchase. So people in Morro Bay, people in Cayucas also own Sunnyside. And that's the only thing I can. It's complicated.
That's what I like about Matthew's idea of if we can convince the school board to whatever we spent for Sunnyside can be reinvested into Los Osos.
Well,
properties
we
in the
were,
district,
we
in
were
the school
told,
district.
or I was told at a meeting, that the proceeds from surplus property have to go back into property related costs. So it's not like you're going to pay for administration, or teacher salary. It does come back into the facilities.
Well, and that's what I'm kind of meaning is I'm hoping that the money, you know, if we can figure out how to do this, that the money can be leveraged essentially. So not only we're getting parks at Sunnyside, but we're getting improvements at our de facto parks, which are the schools.
Okay. Um,
I will also make a motion.
well, should we go over?
I'd go ahead and approve the rest of the consent agenda except for 11G, and we'll just circle back. It's a technicality that we just
Okay.
handled.
All right, go ahead, Matthew.
I move that we receive and file the administrative and committee reports and approve the consent agenda except for item 11G.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
I have to do a roll call for this. There's
Oh,
a
roll call
resolution.
vote.
Oh, yeah, there's.
Vice President Borkroy,
Yes.
Director Cross,
Yes.
Director Sesenia,
Yes.
Director Hubbard,
Yes.
President Womack.
Yes. All right, let's loop back to the introduction of the first reading by title only of an ordinance amending and restating Title 4 of the District Fire Code.
I was informed that we need to read the title because it's by title only. We won't discuss it tonight because we'll have our public hearing at our next meeting. So basically what we're doing is introducing this, so then we can publicize it as a public hearing to the public, at which time we will discuss in detail what this means. So this is our first introduction and a formality that we need to do.
So we're not actually adding this to our district fire code tonight.
We are, not tonight. We are introducing the ordinance.
We are not.
Not introduce, an ordinance has a two-step process, sorry.
Yeah.
But there's a two-step process. You introduce it at one meeting, either read the entire thing, but in this case, it's a pretty long ordinance, so we'll only read the title by board vote. And then at the second meeting is when you actually adopt it, at which point it would be added to the district's code.
Okay. At somewhere in this process, are we gonna discuss what adding these maps means and what these what the fire severity zone maps are for and the impact that they're gonna have on the community? And at some point, I'd like the fire department to talk about. I mean, we've been asking about this. I know I have since 2018. About the progress in mitigating the risk and fuels reduction.
Yeah, those are kind of different discussions, but we will have our fire marshal from CAL FIRE here at our next meeting when we discuss it. That is actually the
I
app.
do appreciate that you blew up that map. Because I had to look at it online to, because you can't, in the black and white, you don't get, but thank you.
I have to stress, this is a requirement of state code for us to add this to our district code.
I totally get that. I just see it as a point to have a bit of discussion about it and understand how that affects the community and in and around risk mitigation with fuels management on the hill above us.
Right. That'll be, I don't know about the fuels management part of that. I mean, we could discuss it, but that's been hung up in U.S. Fish and Wildlife.
There's
the 4D rule. I go into
there's going to be an impact with this new map, right?
Right, and it's whether there's because right now, like up in Bayview Heights, Cabrillo, they've been in the high severity zone.
Sure.
Because they're in the state responsibility area, SRA. Even though they're inside our district, they take responsibility.
Thank you. I was curious why they weren't in red. That didn't make any sense.
Now that we're district, now my entire district is in that severity zone.
Yeah, pretty much your neighborhood.
So,
Yeah.
anyways, that's why I bring it up, and
Right.
I do think that we have to keep advocating for making sure that that's a priority for in the state, because as I understand it, they're doing basically CEQA statewide to be able to do this fuel reductions, and
Right. and
we're going to
as-
need to make sure that we're a priority of that.
And as usual, Los Osos is very special.
Mhm.
We have species here that are in, for instance, the Moro manzanita. And that's prevalent up in the Cabrillo and down through above Highland. And it's been listed federally. Now the state wants to list it, which was going to be a double whammy on our ability to do work, fuel reduction. But right now, been working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Paul Province and myself, Italian Chief Province. And we've gotten to a place where we think we have resolution on how to move forward. But it's taken 5 years of discussions.
Yeah.
So, but
okay.
yeah, if you want that as an agenda item, I'd have to make sure the appropriate people were here. Because the fire marshal can explain the fire severity maps. Basically, it triggers building codes, anything remodeled or constructed,
Mhm.
it adds, these certain criteria of materials and construction.
I'm guessing it might change insurance policies a little bit too.
But that's regardless. It's not just this. I mean, that's an insurance company, response.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, yes, I would like a discussion in and around the maps and what they mean and how they work. And at some point, I would like an update, and I would like that agendized. As far as
I'd be more than happy to make.
as far as our fuels reduction and fuels management in that process and where things are at.
Great idea. Did you have anything to add?
Oh, Kevin, I didn't know you were here. I couldn't see you back there. I thought you.
He's itching.
I am so sorry.
No, no worries. I'm happy that happened. Good evening. I'm Kevin McLean, Battalion Chief, currently assigned as a County Fire Marshal and Fire Marshal for Los Osos Community Service District. The maps did come out on May 10th. I will be presenting a presentation for you on the next one. I do have a slideshow coming in. This should be able to answer some of your questions. And some of the reasons I'm here is hopefully listen to some of the public so I can add that to make sure I answer everyone's questions. The reason, to answer your quick question, the reason why everything else isn't red is because we just wanted to specifically show the local responsibility area. I didn't want to confuse the citizens with, well, I'm in red when they're already in red with the state that we don't adopt. And yes, it is a significant increase in what happened in Los Osos with this map. And I can tell you that the Office of the State Fire Marshal bases it off of hazard, and insurance companies does it off of risk. On our How Far Slow under the Fire Marshal webpage, we have a fact sheet on that people can, and I think I shared it with you a little, but I'll make sure. And I also shared there's a document I'll post on that. Not very good with the adding things onto the internet, so I'm trying to work through that. But I can answer some simple questions now prior to the presentation if you'd like.
That's pretty much it. I think I'm looking forward to that at our next time we see you.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you, Kevin.
The color coding of the sand dunes, does that mean
Thank you.
anything there?
I'm like, why does it go red, orange? And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
are we really responsible for driving over
Did they
there?
rate the dunes actually? Fire hazard?
You know, they have a science that came into it, and it takes into account endercast, topography,
Vegetation?
fuels, vegetation.
It's probably
And-
all sand where it's lighter.
Well, that's what I figured. They got the vegetation maps there and wow.
Yeah, I
Okay.
know it's an extension of, I believe this area here is the state responsibility area. That's all very high, and that's why it extends into the very high into the neighborhoods. The big thing they've taken into account is ember casting from the winds. So.
Yeah, thank you. Thank
Thank
you for being
for,
here also.
And
Yes,
I couldn't see you
Thank you,
back
Chief.
there.
I saw him.
So that's Ron's blind spot right there.
That is my
Now
fault.
we all know.
Okay, so who wants to read by title?
President.
So,
Oh, me? And this is it right here,
yeah,
right?
read the motion.
I read the motion?
Oh, I should take public comment, correct?
Oh, okay, let's open it up for public comment.
If you're online, please raise your hand and in the boardroom, come to the podium. There's no public comment online.
Okay, so been informed, read the motion and then adopt and
Read the motion, vote on it.
and vote on it and then read the title.
Okay. So I recommend the board approve the introduction and first reading of ordinance number 2025-01 by title only, amending Title 4 of the district's code by adding Chapter 4.05 fire severity zone maps, and 2, set the public hearing date for the final adoption for May 1st, 2025, and direct the staff to publish the appropriate hearing notices. Then is the title the thing at the top here?
So now we need to
Oh, okay.
have a second and a
Yeah,
vote.
that was a motion, right? Not just a recommendation. I mean, same thing.
It says
Second.
motion,
I'll
I
second.
recommend.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll second.
okay. And then roll call vote? Okay,
Yes.
President Womack,
yes.
Director Sisenya,
Yes.
Director Cross,
Yes.
Director Hubbard,
Yes.
Vice President Forkroy.
Yes.
Okay.
And so the board has introduced ordinance number 2025-01, an ordinance of the Los Osos Community Services District, adding chapter 4.05 to the Los Osos Community Services Code, designated fire hazard severity zones.
Thank you. That's reading the title. All right, good.
Thank you.
All right. Now what? Oh, do we have a Brown Act training?
Wait, lock the doors, lock the doors.
Wait a second.
No one leaves.
Oh,
Lock
I
the
got
doors.
a phone call. Is Marshall
What, You're
materializing?
taking a Laker Warrior game over this?
Oh, Craig's in it.
Yeah. A new presenter.
I'll be interested to see if anything I have is different than what Marshall used to present.
Marshall mixes it up every year.
Hmm.
Well, this is my first year, so then I'll mix it up next year. Thank you, President, members of the board. I think well, I will just put on my 32 years in government hat and just tell you that I think it's a really admirable process for this board to have training on open government laws every year. Not everybody does it. I think it's a good exhibition of the district's culture of transparency and focusing on doing things the right way. So I commend you for doing that. And I'll try to make this as painless as possible. The open government philosophy in California flows right from the California Constitution. Several years ago, the voters put Article 1, Section 3B1 into the state constitution to say that the people's right to come and participate in these meetings, as well as to look at public documents, are of the highest sort of level of importance. They're constitutional rights in California. So when we give advice about compliance with statutes like the Brown Act, we think of it in terms of a constitutional violation if you violate that statute, right? So we take these transparency laws very seriously because they have been written into the state constitution. There's kind of 5 pieces. We're only going to talk about the Brown Act tonight, so don't worry about that. But just to give you an overall picture, the Brown Act is one piece of the open government philosophy in California. The Political Reform Act, which governs conflicts of interests, gifts and perks, campaign contributions, that's another piece. The Public Records Act is another piece of open government. The Levine Act is new as of last year, which deals with limits and conflicts of interest based on political fundraising. And then all of the concepts of due process, like the public bidding laws, the Public Contracts Code, for example, are included within this constitutional focus on open government. The purposes of the Brown Act are, 1, to promote public participation in the decision-making process. You had a great discussion tonight in your water rate discussion that contributed to the decision-making process, I thought. And that's because there was an item on the agenda that said, come on down and talk about it. It provides public oversight of the decision-making process. I'm a big proponent of the sausage theory in government, and if people can see the decision being made and see what goes into the decision, they're a lot more likely to trust the decision, just like people watching sausage being made. If people feel like there's a process and they can trust it and they can participate in it, they're more trusting of their government agency than those that make decisions kind of behind closed doors. And there's also a statutory protection of public agencies' legitimate confidentiality interests. You had a closed session tonight. We did it the right way. We put notice. There was a public comment before that closed session, but you have an interest in the confidentiality of your discussions with real estate negotiators, because otherwise the other side would know what you're willing to pay for a piece of property, for example. This is the meat of the Brown Act. This is Government Code Section 54953A, and it says all meetings of the legislative body of a local agency shall be open and public. All persons shall be permitted to attend any meeting of the legislative body of a local agency except as otherwise provided. So I always break this down into what's a meeting, what's a legislative body, what does it mean to be open and public, and what does it mean to participate, and what are the exceptions, right? So there's like 5 pieces to that one paragraph of text. The Brown Act applies to legislative bodies, which is the governing body of the local agency. So this board is a legislative body under the Brown Act. It also applies to your subordinate boards and commissions that are created by formal action of the governing body. So that would be a standing committee, like a couple of the committees that have been discussed tonight. And that formal action of the body is the important piece of that. I was with another district a couple of days ago when they were talking about appointing a committee, and the board members wanted to vote on appointing that committee and who should be on that committee, as opposed to the chair just saying, hey, I think we need a limited group of people to talk about this issue. And that distinction of the board appointing the committee would have turned it into a standing committee, a Brown Act committee, as opposed to what they really wanted was just 2 members of the board to go gather some facts and report back. So that advisory committee, that ad hoc committee that I know you have experience with here, is not a legislative body. And that's the distinction. Is it created by this formal action of this board to kind of have ongoing responsibilities? Or is it just a couple of people designated to go gather facts and report back? And that's the distinction between a legislative body that has to comply with the Brown Act and an ad hoc committee that does not. What is a meeting? These are the elements. A majority of members of the body present at the same time and location, including a teleconference location, to hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action on any item within the subject matter jurisdiction. So the majority of the members of the body is obviously easy. You've got a 5-member body. If 3 of you are together in the same time and location, including by technology, to hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action on some item within your jurisdiction, then that's a meeting and it has to be covered by the Brown Act. You can go to a local coffee shop, all 5 of you can sit at a table and talk about the Dodgers, the weather, your grandkids, your children, whatever you want that's not the business of this district, and that's not covered by the Brown Act. But at the minute you start talking about, boy, we need more parks or the water rates or whatever, that's what the Brown Act and the state constitution require to happen in an open and public meeting. Now, politics being what they are, you all know that nobody would believe that you were sitting at that coffee shop just talking about the weather, but it would be legal. You could also talk about something that's happening with another government body that doesn't have anything to do with this district. Again, perception being what it is in politics, that would be a tough sell to say that it wasn't a meeting, but this is what the definition, what the elements of a meeting are under the Brown Act. Serial meetings are illegal. So it not only a case that you're all sitting in a room talking about something at the same time, it's possible to have a serial meeting, which would be illegal, which is the process of passing information or making decisions from one to one to one, either through staff or simply like by, the sort of telephone tag game where one calls the other and then you call the other and you develop a collective concurrence through the use of an intermediary or technology. That being said, individual briefings are okay. Ron can meet with each one of you. I could meet with each one of you individually to have a one-way communication. Look, I just want to let you know about this issue, answer your questions. Some of you may come in to discuss the agenda before a meeting. That's absolutely okay for staff to do. What staff can't do is say, well, I met with board member A and here's what she said. And now I'm just telling board member B, board member A is on board. All we got to do is get one more vote. You can't use that unidirectional kind of briefing exception to build a concurrence among the board. So if it's truly just a conversation, staff to board, one way, that's absolutely permitted by the Brown Act. And a lot of board members think that's a productive thing to do, to kind of get questions out of the way and have discussions about issues individually, so they're not influencing other members of the board. As I say, there are kind of two types. That hub and spoke kind of situation is where the general manager might call all of you and tell each other what you think about an issue. Sharing that kind of information, trying to build votes, is not permitted. That's an illegal serial meeting. The other one is the chain meeting where one of you calls the other and they keep sharing information that way. More often, in today's world, serial meetings take place digitally. They take place by email. They take place by group texts. They take place on social media or comments on websites where you may not even be aware that your colleagues on the board are included in those communications. You might have a group text, for example, that has 30 names on it or 30 numbers on it. And if you don't look carefully, you don't know that the other members of the board are on that group text. So all of those kind of group communications, including the dreaded thing that I wish had never been invented, which is the reply all button on email, that's the most common finding of an illegal serial meeting under the Brown Act. Is somebody who got an email, there's a long list of people, and decided to reply to all. And in the course of replying to all, replied to all of the members of the board expressing an opinion on an issue that's coming before the board. And that's something you really have to be careful about. I always advise staff to send group emails via BCC, because you can't reply to a BCC.
That's what
the
Ron
whole group.
does.
Yeah, and so that's a really good way to help board members avoid it, because you know how you work. You're just going quickly and you say, oh, I got to tell them what I think. And you hit that reply all button and all of a sudden you've created a problem. I'm going to talk in a minute more about the Brown Act and social media, but over the course of my career, where I started with barely people having computers to now everybody having a computer at the end of their arm, the Brown Act has evolved to really be focused on social media interaction. And there are now specific statutes on that. Takeaways from this issue of serial meetings: avoid discussing district business with more than one other member outside of a public meeting. Some agencies, in fact, even go so far as to say we have Brown Act buddies, and there's two members can talk to each other about issues, but they can only talk to each other. And then another two members are Brown Act buddies, and they have that same kind of limitation. This district is probably small enough and informal enough that you don't need to have that kind of Brown Act buddy system. I guarantee you, like, for example, the Board of Supervisors has a system like that, because they're always having discussions. And if they didn't have a limitation, they would violate the Brown Act all the time. I would advise you to avoid soliciting or communicating the view of other members outside of a meeting. So if you're at for example, that town hall, you don't want to have the chair up on the stage saying, hey, my fellow board members are here. Why don't you all raise your hands and show that you support this project, or something like that, right? That's a political type of move, but it's something that would be a serial meeting, and you want to avoid those kinds of solicitations. And definitely avoid interacting with each other on social media about district issues. Tips for electronic communications. I would advise you not to communicate your position on a pending matter in any format that goes to a majority of the members of this body outside of this meeting. Do not, even like in comment sections or commenting on social media posts, solicit responses from other members. Don't tag somebody and say, "What do you think?" Because that's inviting a violation of the Brown Act. And do not hit reply all. If you get one of those messages from staff or from somebody in the community saying, you know, here's this issue, reply individually. Don't reply all. You can interact with your constituents, you can interact with staff, you just can't do it collectively. Do use caution, as I say, use that BCC when you're emailing staff, and even if you want other people to see, you know, it's a calendar invite or somebody's scheduling kind of thing. It's not really substantive. You can show people, I'm going to be available on Monday, but do it by BCC because you don't want replies to be going back and forth. And just remember that deliberations must occur publicly in a meeting that complies with the Brown Act. Discussions can't be by text or by social media. There's a whole controversy now in the city of Los Angeles, you may be aware of, based, you know, because of the fires in Pacific Palisades, and the LA Times is actually suing the mayor and city council members to get texts because they want to know what if any discussions were happening during the fires between council members. And there's a big controversy because the city attorney's office is pushing back on those requests. So it's just best to not have those discussions in writing at all. Oh, I didn't do the graphics on this, but that's kind of funny, actually. Okay, internet-based social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever the social media platform that I don't have that's hot today. Here's what the Brown Act now says. You cannot make, post, or share comments between members of a legislative body, which includes using digital icons, just like a thumbs up or a heart or whatever, to posts about district business. So if it's a post where somebody puts a picture of their food or their cat or whatever, you're free to like that. That has nothing to do about district business. But if the post is, come on down to the town hall meeting, we're going to talk about this important issue and here's what I think, you cannot respond to each other's posts in that social media context, even so far as just liking it. The statute specifically says just even the digital approval or disapproval is a violation of the Brown Act. And in this case, it applies to 2 members of the board, not a majority. So even if one of you just responds to a social media post, that's a violation. So I would just advise you to stay away from your fellow board members' social media posts on any district business or any, you know, political issue. Like I say, you want to like the picture of the cat. That's not a problem, or dog. It is okay in social media for you to answer questions from the public. So if you have your own social media presence and you get questions, or you can provide information to the public, you can even solicit input from the public. You just can't take it from your colleagues on the board. There are now more and more ways to engage in a teleconference meeting. You have this kind of hybrid meeting where the public can participate by Zoom. Actually, there are 3 ways in which board members can participate by a teleconference in kind of special circumstances. It's a hassle, and you know, it may not always be worth the hassle, but if you have to be out of town for a meeting, for example, there's always been a teleconference provision where you could call in from, if you're on a business trip, or if you're you know, away on a personal matter. The rule is that the quorum has to be here in the room participating in the meeting, and the teleconference location has to be identified on the agenda. and then the agenda has to be posted wherever you are. So I've actually had board members who, were on vacation in Hawaii and wanted to participate in something. They put their, hotel they were staying at in Hawaii and said they were going to be in the bar from whatever time to whatever time, and got the hotel to post the agenda just so everything was compliant with the Brown Act. That seems to me to be a lot of hassle to participate in one meeting, but sometimes stuff is important and you're not able to be here. So it is possible to do that. And we can help set that up if a teleconference is necessary. There are two other types of remote participation that were adopted in the COVID crisis. One is a just cause emergency exception where a member of the board has to stay home to take care of a sick relative or is sick themselves and they don't want to come get everybody else in the room sick. There's a process by which that can be allowed. Both of these have a limit. You can do it twice in a year. So it's not the kind of thing where everybody could miss, participate remotely for every meeting. The other one is where there's an actual proclaimed emergency. We learned how hard it was in COVID. We learned again in the last couple of years of fires that sometimes people have to worry about evacuating or protecting themselves from an emergency and can't come running down to a board meeting, but still want to participate because often the board is talking about the emergency. So AB 361 now allows remote participation when there's a declared emergency. And I think that was a really good improvement that the legislature inserted, because especially during COVID, there were those really tense lockdown times in some counties where nobody was going to go into the same room together. So that the Brown Act has evolved, and we can, again, if in a case of a proclaimed emergency, we can deal with those teleconference options. There are a bunch of things that look like a meeting that are not a meeting under the Brown Act, and you should be aware of those. As I said, the individual contacts, if you run into your constituents in the grocery store, even if that constituent talks to all 5 members of the board at some time, those individual contacts are not, don't violate the Brown Act. Your individual briefings with Ron don't violate the Brown Act, again, as long as you're not sharing information. Y'all can go to conferences and seminars together, provided that they are actual conferences and seminars like CSDA or those kinds of things. You can all be there together. You can all be sitting in the same session. And as long as you're not using that as a reason to stand over in the corner and make a deal on some district matter, that doesn't violate the Brown Act. In fact, it's perfectly okay and encouraged. You can go to community meetings together as long as they are open and publicized. So if it's an HOA meeting or the Chamber of Commerce or the Kiwanis, whatever, you can all go to those meetings as long as they're open and people know that there's a meeting that's occurring. You can, as it sounded like tonight, you have attend another body of the agency. So some of you might have attended committee meetings. You can do that as long as it's an open and noticed meeting of that body. You can go to social or ceremonial events. Pretty self-explanatory. You can attend ad hoc committee meetings. However, both ad hoc and standing committee meetings, you cannot participate if you're not a member of the committee. So you can observe, you can't talk or try to influence any of the decisions. Couple of basic types of meetings. The most basic type of meeting under the Brown Act is the regular meeting. That's what you've had tonight. Day, time, location set by resolution or ordinance, and the agenda has to be posted 72 hours in advance. Can't do anything that doesn't show up on the agenda, and that agenda must include a general brief description of items that business that are going to be transacted at the regular meeting. The other kind of meeting is a special meeting. We had one of those, I think, in the first month I worked with you on the Sunnyside issue. A special meeting is just about whatever that topic of the special meeting is. You can't talk about stuff that's not on the agenda. The public doesn't get to talk about stuff that's not on the agenda. And all you can do is what is on the agenda. Under the regular meeting rules, as I'll cover in a minute, we can add things to the agenda in certain circumstances. You can't do that for a special meeting. The trade-off is that a special meeting notice only has to be up for 24 hours. So what the legislature is saying is, yeah, there might be a circumstance where you need to do something quickly, but you're only going to do that. You're not going to add anything to it. You're not going to talk about other stuff. The agenda, as I said, has to have that brief description of the item of business. It's got to be publicly accessible, distributed in advance to people who want copies. Got to be posted on the agency's website as you do. And if there's a teleconference location, it has to be included on the agenda. And then no discussion or action on items not on the posted agenda, with a couple of really limited exceptions that we'll talk about. At a regular meeting, you can add something to the agenda. If an item comes to the agency's attention after the agenda was posted, in that 72-hour period where the agenda is posted, and there's something that needs to be done before your next meeting. Now, in your case, you have a month between regular meetings, so it could be, fairly frequent that stuff comes up at the last minute and has to get done in that interim time. So the Brown Act allows you to add it to the agenda as long as you have a 2/3 vote. So you add it to the agenda, then you can, under these processes, then you can take action on it as long as the 2/3 of you voted to add it to the agenda. Things that kind of look like they might happen at a meeting, but are not required to be on the on the agenda. Brief response to public comments. The comment tonight about somebody wanting to get involved is a good example. Somebody said, I want to get involved. A couple of you said, well, maybe, you should apply for a committee. You should come to meetings. That's absolutely fine. It's just a response to something somebody said at the podium. You can ask questions for clarification or refer things to staff. Sometimes people will come in and say, my water meter is broken. How do I get it fixed? You can ask staff to have somebody give them a call or tell them the answer to the question. You all can make a brief announcement or report on your activities if you went to a meeting or you have something you want your colleagues to know about. You can make a request, as it happened tonight, for a future report on something that's within your jurisdiction. You can agree to place an item on a future agenda. And you can also determine that an emergency situation exists. If we were sitting here in a meeting and a fire started and we needed to get an emergency in effect, theoretically, it's possible to do that without it being on the agenda. I've never seen that happen, but it is in the statute. Public has a right to participate at your meetings. They have a right to speak on any item within the subject matter jurisdiction of the body at regular meetings only, or the specific item of business on the agenda at either the special meeting or when there's a particular agenda item. In your case, you have a relatively limited jurisdiction, right? There's a limited number of things that this district is responsible for. People can't come in here and talk about tariffs or the war in Ukraine or those kinds of things. This is not a public forum for everybody to come talk about whatever they want to talk about. There's a famous case in the city of Berkeley where people came in to protest the Vietnam War, and the city council adopted a policy that said, we're not talking about the Vietnam War anymore because we don't have anything to do with the Vietnam War, and that was challenged. And under the Brown Act, the court said, yeah, the city council has to require people to talk about their subject matter jurisdiction, not national politics. So there are some limits on folks exercising their First Amendment rights here in this board meeting. Public agencies, however, may not prohibit public criticism of the agency or the legislative body. If somebody wants to get up and criticize staff or criticize the operations of the district or criticize your board, they have the right to do that within your reasonable rules. Your reasonable rules have time limits. You require people to identify themselves, although if they say, I don't want to identify myself, they can't be forced to. We have rules of decorum. They apply to everybody, but within those rules of decorum, people can criticize if that's what they want to do. Enforcement of the Brown Act. We hope, obviously, we never get there, but there are both civil and criminal penalties for violations of the Brown Act. The civil action is most often the enforcement mechanism that district attorneys choose because it basically requires the district attorney to tell us to do a do-over, right? They say, hey, you violated the Brown Act by taking this vote or by talking about this issue that wasn't on your agenda or by engaging in a serial meeting. We want you to do it right. So put it on an agenda, hold a meeting, go through it again. So in most cases, if there actually is a violation and we agree that there was a violation, we're able to say, sorry, we messed that up, we'll do it right. There's this notice and opportunity to cure. A lot of times you don't agree with the conclusion, right? Somebody from the public files a complaint, assumes that they know what we did in closed session and that we made some sinister decision back here, and they file a complaint. Well, we're not going to fix that. We can't fix that if we didn't violate the Brown Act. So there are limitations to this, but that's the main focus of enforcement. The law does provide for criminal sanctions. A criminal charge can be brought against any individual who violates the Brown Act by the district attorney, but there has to have been an action taken at a meeting in violation of the Brown Act, and there has to be, the DA has to approve intent to deprive the public of information. And that intent piece is the hardest part. And so that's why there's never been a successful criminal prosecution of anybody for violating the Brown Act. It almost always goes through this civil process, and that civil process can be politically embarrassing. It can be controversial. So it's almost worse than being prosecuted for a misdemeanor. But both of those options are available. And that is what board members need to know about the Brown Act. And I hope I did Marshall proud.
Thank you, Craig.
Thank you. Good job, Craig. Thank you.
All right.
Yep.
There's more. Any future agenda items? I kind of have one. Can we talk about the money we got from fire and maybe investing it? From what timeline you want those funds available?
I just need to, because, excuse me. We're gonna move a chunk into reserves. And I think I told you we have it in camp right now, and that's about just a hair under 4.5%. I can discuss this with Optimized.
Yeah, I think that would be a good discussion because we could see rates drop. So maybe if we are not using that money right away, we invest out a little bit.
Yeah, we have some hefty expenses coming up with fire station remodel.
Right. What's the timing of that?
Well, we're trying to resolve the contract issues, so we understand what our overall expenses are. So I don't have a firm answer for you right now. I was hoping to do it like in the next year, or at least we're
Okay.
gonna do it in phases.
If it's a year or less, then camp is a good place.
Right.
But if it's more than a year,
Because we had kind of looked at the project in 3 phases, because once you get into the building, we need to move people around or out, like for the living quarters. And so anyway, we can talk about that more as well.
and I also wonder if our other investments we have are maturing, so we could use
Right.
that. But anyway, any closing board comments?
I wanted to thank Ron for all of his work. I mean, you've been all over the Sunnyside deal, and I know that's been taking a lot of your time. So, thank you for doing that, getting us to that town hall, which was, I think, really successful.
Thank you.
Spread the
Yeah,
word.
that was quite an accomplishment, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, it was a big deal. So, thanks.
Great. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate that we had some community input. That's
Yeah,
good.
that's what I want to say thank you to, the people who came down tonight that we haven't seen before, even though they're not here.
Yeah, well, they were here, so. All right, I will adjourn this meeting. Thanks, everyone.